Survival house. They could take the youths and bring them back into the schoolhouse. Education was saying go get your education, me a beg you no revise where you learn from class, me a tell you no. Cause it's not hard, it's a task, just give yourself a chance and you say that you grasp where them tell you no. Go get your education, me a beg you no revise where you learn from class, me a tell you no. Cause it's not hard, it's a task, just give yourself a chance and you say that you grasp where them tell you no. Load the machine, I better you go the machine instead of you the panic.
Welcome to another Science Audio Visual Tutor, brought to you by yours truly, Ronique Bernard. Human and Social Biology. Our topic for today will be on coordination and control. Let's look at our preview. All around us, in our surroundings, there are stimuli which affect our behavior. These stimuli include light, sounds, gravity, movement, touch, pain, temperature, and chemical tastes. Sense organs contain receptors which detect these stimuli. Human sense organs are the eyes, skin, nose, and tongue. At this moment, I would like for you to listen and to carefully observe everything that is shown to you in the video clip to come. Welcome to another human and social biology activity. I understand that the last lesson you enjoyed it. But this time, we're going to do a little activity to introduce our next lesson. Please listen, look, and pay attention. Now here we have one of our volunteers who has been blindfolded, so she's not aware of what is going to happen to her. We're asking you now to observe the stimulus and to observe her response to the stimulus. Okay, you heard the response to the stimulus. Let me ask you a question. What happened a while ago? What happened a while ago? What happened?
I feel the heat on the chair.
You heard that? You felt the what?
Heat on the chair.
The heat under the chair?
Yeah.
Okay, so she felt the heat under the chair. This is what she felt. So what happened is that, remember, the largest sense organ is her what? Skin. So her sense organ has some heat receptors that actually send a message to her spinal cord. So you realize that she responded quickly as soon as she felt the heat. So it did not really go, the message did not go to the brain. It went straight to her spinal cord, and then guess what happened? The spinal cord sent a message back to the muscles, because she actually got up to the muscles of the what? Her limbs, her lower limbs. So she actually got up, and the muscles there are referred to as the effector. So later on in the lesson, I'll let you give you a much more clear explanation as to what happened a while ago. Thank you for viewing another of our activity. Okay, you have just watched our video clip, and you saw that the young man, well, the young lady rather, she was blindfolded, so therefore she was not aware of what was going to happen to her. Anyway, the young man took the lighter and he placed it under the chair, and then she was there for a few little seconds, few little minutes, and eventually she just jumped up like that. You saw that, didn't you? Now, why you think all of that happened? What went on inside of her body for that to happen? Okay, now pay close attention now to the explanation. Okay, here we have a candle, and the candle, of course, has been lit. So therefore, heat is coming off this candle. Now this red line here, starting from inside of the hands, is called the sensory neuron. Now this blue line right here, it's called the motor neuron. And of course the muscle is the effector. And inside of the gray matter we have relay neuron. Now note, the gray matter itself will have cell bodies of the spinal or the nerves that will be in the white matter. Okay, now at this end of the sensory neuron we have the what? Receptor. And remember, in the preview you were told that the receptor detects the stimuli. Now my question to you, what would be the stimuli in this case? Alright, the stimuli would have been the change in temperature. Alright? Now, notice what's happened right here. Now this purple object is representing a nerve impulse. Good? Now the receptor, what they do is that they convert the stimuli into a nerve impulse. And in other textbooks, the nerve impulse is normally referred to as the message. Alright? Now carefully observe where the nerve impulse is going and how it got there. Alright, if you notice now that the nerve impulse traveled along the sensory what? Neuron. So therefore, the function of the sensory neuron is to carry the nerve impulse from the receptor to the central nervous system. And of course, the central nervous system is made up of the spinal cord, which is this that you're looking at, and the brain. Okay, now the message now is now in the spinal cord. So clearly what is going to happen now is that the spinal cord is going to quickly analyze this message. Okay, now a message now will be passed from the spinal cord, as you're going to see. So this green star now will represent the message now coming from the spinal cord. And let us see where this message is going to go. Alright, notice what happened a while ago? Let's look back at that. Now the message, it basically traveled along the motor neuron. Good? And guess what happened now? So what is the function then of the motor neuron? The function of the motor neuron is to carry the message or nerve impulses rather from the spinal cord or from the central nervous system to an effector. And what it tells the effector to do? Basically to what? Move your hand. So in summary, simply what happens? The receptor of the skin, and you know that the skin is a sense organ, the largest sense organ, and the receptor of the skin, which is the heat receptor or the temperature receptor, detect extreme heat that the body should not be exposed to. So therefore, the stimuli here will be the heat, and then the receptor will change or convert that stimuli into an electrical impulse or electrochemical impulse, and then that will travel along the sensory neuron of in the case of the young lady's leg, it traveled along the sensory neurons in her in our legs right there, and then the message went up to the spinal cord, and then the spinal cord now analyzes the message, then sends a message back to the muscles of her leg, causing her to get up as you saw before, and then the muscles of her leg, which is the effector. So therefore the message went along the motor neuron and then to the muscles of her leg, causing her to get up quickly. So therefore, a reflex action is a quick automatic response to a stimuli, and this action helps to protect the body. Now we are going to look in details now on the sensory neuron. Now, sensory neurons are nerve cells within the nervous system, responsible for converting. And another word for converting is what? Change. So let us use the word change then. So sensory neurons are nerve cells within the nervous system responsible for changing external stimuli. Good. The external means what? Outside. So outside of the what? Organism's body. So it changes or it converts the external stimuli from the organism. Now question. Who was the organism this time? Yes, it was the young lady who's the organism. What was the external stimuli? Of course, it was the heat. And where was the heat coming from? Outside. So then, the sensory neuron changes that heat energy then, changes the heat energy into what we call electrochemical energy. Alright, this is basically what happened. So it converts external stimuli from the organism's environment into an internal electrical impulse. And that is basically what the sensory neuron does. Okay? Now, if you look on the picture right here, you will see CNS, which means central nervous system, and you will see PNS, which means peripheral nervous system. And of course, you'll see the cell body, which is right here, and every cell has a what? Nucleus. So you'll have a nucleus inside of the cell. Now, this end right here is called the dendrite or the dendron. Good. And then now this part of the sensory neuron is called the axon or central process. Now notice what happens. If you remember what this purple object represents, it represents the what? The electrical impulse. Now where's the electrical impulse coming from? It will be coming from the peripheral nervous system. Now the peripheral nervous system obviously is made up of what? Sensory neurons, or receptors rather. Good. Now note what is going to happen now. Okay. Now you notice now that you saw some movements where the impulse was kind of like jumping. Now this little part of the dendron is referred to as a node, or otherwise called the node of rendezvous. Now, so these nodes will help the impulse to travel along the dendron much faster. Now, the dendron is this white area inside here. And this little black area right here is actually called a myelin sheath. And what this sheath does, it acts as an insulator and ensure or maintain the electrical environment within the dendron. So the myelin sheath, it basically helps in maintaining the speed of the electrical impulse. Alright? So remember now that the dendron carries the electrical impulse from the peripheral nervous system to the cell body. Okay. Now, so now the axon now in the other on the other hand carries the electrical impulse away from the cell body to the central nervous system. So finally, in summary, the sensory neuron is basically the nerve cell that carries information from the peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system. Now we're going to look at another neuron, which is called the what? Motor neuron. Now,
Invertebrates, the term, sorry, in vertebrates, the term motor neuron or motor neuron classically applies to neurons located in the central nervous system. In other words, you will find these neurons in the nervous system, central nervous system, that is. And for short, it is CNS. So, applies to neurons located in the central nervous system that project their axons. So to project means to what? Push out. That push out their axons outside the central nervous system and directly or indirectly control muscles. So therefore, it is the motor neurons that directly or indirectly controls the what? Muscles. Good? So the motor neuron is often associated with efferent neuron, primary neuron, or alpha motor neurons. Now note, the word alpha means what? Beginning. Good? So, like, God would say He's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. So, Alpha here means what? Beginning. Why? Because everything begins in the what? Central nervous system. That's where the decisions are made. Now, as said in the paragraph above, let's look at the picture below. Now, this right here is a what? A muscle. Good? Now, these ends right here are the ends of the what? Motor neuron. And of course, the axon will carry messages from the cell body. Right? And of course, there's a message coming from the central nervous system. Now, you have a gap or a little space between the ends of this neuron and the ends of the cell body right here. And the name of that gap is called the synapse. A little later from now, you will learn more about the synapse. Now, what is going to happen is simple. But remember that the motor neuron is located in the what? Central nervous system. And it states that the motor neuron projects. So to notice now that the axon is projecting outside the what? Central nervous system. And of course, it will directly or indirectly control the muscles. So as you can see, the messages will be taken from the central nervous system and carried to the what? Muscle. Now note now. Remember this green star? What does the green star represent? Okay, the green star represents the message coming from the central what? Nervous system. Okay, so clearly the function of the motor neuron is to carry the message from the central nervous system to the effector. Alright, so now we're going to the synapse. Alright, now let us identify the parts on this picture here. Now this is a axon. Good, and remember the axon is a part of the motor neuron that is projected. Now we have this blue circle here, and this one represents the synaptic vesicles. And then the gap or the space between the end of a neuron and the end of another neuron is called the synapse. Now, these green things inside the synaptic vesicles are chemical chemical substances that are called neurotransmitters. Now you know the word neuro coming from neurology. Okay, neurosurgeon. So it has to refer to what? Nerves. So basically, it's a nerve transmitter. Means that transmit means to what? Take across. So you're going to see where now that these green things will take across the nerve impulses. Alright, let's pay attention to what's going to happen. Very good. So you notice now that the synaptic vesicle, now you need to ask a question. What is it that causes the synaptic vesicle to move and to carry out its function? Now, the presence of a nerve impulse will actually stimulate the synaptic vesicles to carry the neurotransmitters and to an extension to stimulate the neurotransmitters to carry these nerve impulses, as you can see. So basically, when you're going to describe the synapses, you must make mention of the synaptic vesicle, which consists of the neurotransmitters, and the neurotransmitters is what basically carries the nerve impulse across the synapse. Okay, now this is referred to as action potential. Now let us examine the picture. Now you're seeing a cylinder shaped object. Good. Now this cylinder shaped object is an axon. Now the blue lines really referred to as the membrane of the what? Axon. Very good. Now, outside of the axon, it is positively charged, and inside of the axon, it is negatively charged. Now, my question to you, is there any difference between the charges? Yes, there is, because the outside is positive and the inside is negative. Now, this green object here, or these green objects, four of them, they represent what we call sodium ions. Now, Na, capital N, common A, is a symbol for what? An element called sodium. Now, this neuron is currently resting, means that it is not active at the moment. Now, I'm going to explain to you now what what really happens in this thing they call action potential. Remember what this represents? It represents the what? Nerve impulse. Now note what happens. Okay, notice now as the nerve impulse passes along, these sodium ions were able to enter the what? The axon, or pass through the membrane of the what? Axon. So note what I'm going to say here now, that the nerve impulse, which is this, depends on the membrane of the axon, and another word for membrane is covering. Good. The nerve impulses, depends on the covering or the membrane of the axon becoming permeable to certain ions. Good. So this nerve impulse needs the axon membrane to allow these ions to pass through. Fine? Are you following that? Good. Now, permeable means leaky or oily, meaning that for something to pass through something, there has to be what? Holes. Because guess what? If you have a plastic bag, think about it. If you have a plastic bag with water inside of it and you tie the bag, the water remains in the bag, don't it? But when you bore a hole in the bag, the water begins to what? Leak out. So it's the same thing here, that the passing of the nerve impulse will cause the membrane of the axon to have holes in it, and then these holes now will allow the sodium ions to enter the axon. Good. So therefore now the axon of a neuron in the resting condition has a difference in electrical charge between the inside and the outside, as I've seen before. Good. Now watch this now. So the result therefore is that the outside becomes negative and the inside becomes positive. Now, after the nerve impulse passes, what will happen is that the axon will basically push out the sodium ions, and then the cycle starts over again. But note this, write this down. Nerve impulses are waves of electrochemical changes which travel in one direction along a neuron. So you realize now that this nerve impulse was traveling in one direction. Alright, just to kind of make this a little bit more clearer for you. Now, on a normal basis for the whole idea of flow of electrons. Now, current basically is a flow of electrons. Good? So there's the movement of electrons along a circuit path that creates current. So the electrical impulse itself is like current. Now, as was said to you before, that the nerve impulse depends on the membrane. In other words, that word depends there is telling you that for the nerve impulse itself to move, good, the outside of the axon has to become negative. And for the outside of the axon to become negative, the sodium ions have to flow inside of the axon. You follow now? Good. Let me say that again. For the nerve impulse to move, the outside of the axon has to become negative. Now for that to become negative, the sodium ions has to move on the inside of the axon. Good. So therefore, for the sodium ions to move on the inside of the axon, the membrane of the axon has to become permeable, meaning holy, leaky. Holes are created, allowing the sodium ions to actually pass through. And that's what it means by that the nerve impulse depends on the membrane of the axon becoming permeable to certain ions. Alright, so now we're going to go straight into the main divisions of the nervous system. Now, note that the central nervous system is made up of the brain, which is this, and the spinal cord. So the central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. So we have the cranial nerve, and the cranial nerve is what? Nerves branching from the what? The cranium. And we have the spinal nerves, which are nerves branching from the spinal cord, as you can see, right? Good. So both the cranial nerve and the spinal nerves makes up the peripheral nervous system. And if you notice that these nerves are basically branching off into the what? The hands and the rest of other parts of the body. Very good. So the two main divisions now of the nervous system are the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Okay, now we're going to move into the brain. Now, of course, you know that the brain itself is enclosed in the cranium. Good? Now, the brain has four interconnecting chambers called ventricles. And these contain what we call cerebrospinal fluid and are continuous with the central canal of the spinal cord. Alright? Now, the posterior region of the brain is called the medulla oblongata, which would have been this section here. And this contains regions which control involuntary actions such as breathing movements and heart attack. Now we have the hindbrain, which will be somewhere right here, which is another region of the brain, and the cerebellum, it lies behind and above. As you can see, the cerebellum, it is behind the medulla oblongata, and of course it is above the medulla oblongata. So it is behind it and also above it. Now the cerebellum, which is this structure here, looking like a leaf itself, it receives information on the balance of the body from the air and the muscles and constantly send out impulses to the muscles to maintain correct posture. So basically, this part of the brain, it controls balance, posture, and muscle action. Now, another region of the brain, which is the midbrain. Now, the midbrain is a small region containing nerve fibers which connect the parts of the hindbrain with the forebrain. So the hindbrain and the forebrain is connected by the midbrain. Now the forebrain now consists mainly of the cerebrum, which is right here. So this region is called the forebrain. So the forebrain consists mainly of the cerebrum, made up of the two enormous cerebral hemispheres. And the surfaces of these have folds or convolutions called the cerebral cortex. Alright, so the cerebrum is a part of the what? Forebrain. Now, what is the purpose of the cerebrum? Now, the function of the cerebrum is to control memory, conscious thought, intelligent actions. Now, the hypothalamus now on the other hand, which is right here, it controls the body temperature and water balance. And of course, we have mentioned before that the cerebellum, it controls balance, posture, and muscle action, which is the cerebellum. And the medulla oblongata, once again, it controls involuntary actions, example, heartbeat and breathing. Involuntary means that you don't have to think to do it. It just happens automatically. Alright, so that's it for the brain. You can read your worksheet for the other information. Alright, scenario number 1. Tyrone was standing over the stove and was wondering whether he should try to learn how to cook rice, and then in a few minutes, after thinking of all the advantages this would have, he decided to do so. Explain the role of the nervous system which causes Tyrone to act. Now note, Tyrone is here wondering if he should learn how to cook rice. And all of a sudden, he begins to think about it and then he decides. Now I want to ask you a question. Is this voluntary action or involuntary action? Yes, it is voluntary because it is Tyrone who actually decides. He wanted to do it, so it was his choice. Good? But the question here, or the task that you have here, is to explain the role of the nervous system which causes Tyrone to act. So here we are going to do now. Now remember, the cerebrum is what controls conscious thought. So all of the whole idea of Tyrone thinking about what to do and whatever begins right here. It begins in the cerebrum. Now let's look at the diagram some more. Now this area is called the white matter, and of course this area is called the what? Gray matter. And this motor neuron, as you can see, is represented by a blue line, and then the muscle is the effector. Now let us notice what happens. Remember this green star? Message coming from the central what? Nervous system. And the fact of the matter is that the central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. So here's a message. A message now is going to come from the cerebrum. Alright. Now the message, what do you think this message is? Obviously Tyrone has made a decision. Tyrone has decided that he's going to learn to cook. But Tyrone cannot stand up and cook. Neither can he look and cook, nor taste and cook. Tyrone has to use his hands. Isn't that so? And his legs, because he has to move and go for the rice, go for this and go for that. So, therefore, Tyrone has made a decision in the cerebrum, and then a message now was sent along the cranial nerve to the spinal cord, and then a message was now sent from the spinal cord by the motor neuron to the effector, which is the muscles. And of course, it is the muscles that is going to cause the movement. So therefore, that is how voluntary actions is carried out. So voluntary actions begins in the central nervous system in the brain, and then that message now is carried from the brain by the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, and then by the what? Motor neurons, and then it is taken to the effector muscles where the body will begin to respond. Now we're going to another part of the lesson, the eye. Okay, now this is our eye. Now the function of the cornea is simply to bend light rays as it enters the eye. Now remember that light rays, they travel in a straight line. So on entering the cornea, they will refract, or they will what? Bend towards the pupil. Now light has to pass through something that is transparent, because light cannot pass through a wall, because obviously a wall is what? Opaque. So it will what? Reflect. So instead of reflecting, the light rays is refracted. So hence, because of the transparency of the cornea, light is able to pass through and then bend towards the pupil. Now the pupil now, of course, the pupil, if you take your thumb and place your finger on your thumb, you are looking through a hole. Now that hole that you're